Welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm joined by Dr. Jared A. Pincin. He's Associate Professor of Economics at Cedarville University, and he joins us to talk about the ethics and economics of sports gambling. You've been following me in this program, and you know that sports gambling is one of those areas that's of significant interest to me and my concern for how it's becoming more and more ubiquitous. Jared, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, very glad to have you join us to talk about this. I want to ask you, just from a big picture perspective, what drew you to want to think about this as a core issue?
I didn't think of how ubiquitous it's become, and I teach college students for a living, so they're at the intersection of when smartphones have become more popular, as well as all of a sudden the legalization of sports gambling in the States. And so it was a confluence of events, and I'm concerned about their own well-being, as well as even just thinking of sports itself and how sports can be affected by something that isn't new. Gambling's been around for a long time, but again, is now everywhere.
Like you said, gambling's been around for a long time. We all know the addictive capacities of gambling. And so everyone listening and watching, they know that if you have a tendency toward this, it's typically the kind of thing where you want to cut a distance from, right?
That's right.
The problem with the modern day is that this is a particular addiction that will find you. The ads are just everywhere. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so when a new state or just a new area legalizes gambling, you'll see these sports books spend an inordinate amount of money on gambling ads, which makes sense because they're trying to break into a market. And then those sort of fade away as it becomes a more mature market. But what they've also done is they have now partnered with sports organizations. And so now it's everywhere. You can't watch a sports show without a discussion of betting lines or your fantasy lineup. And a fantasy is almost like a Trojan horse into more serious gambling. But that's all that they talk about anymore. It used to be something that was a sort of a segment. Maybe they'd pick games at the end of the show. And now it's front and center. I mean, sometimes SportsCenter will lead off with a discussion of, how are people thinking about the betting lines on this particular sporting event. So it's everywhere. Yeah.
The ubiquitousness of it has generated a whole new plethora or dimension of sports gambling addiction. And you being a college professor, too, I wonder if you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, it doesn't change the ethics, it doesn't change the morality of the decision-making, but the fact that most gambling takes place on your mobile device, roughly 95% of gambling takes place there. It's just in front of you at all time. I'm old enough, you're old enough as well, I'm guessing, to remember when cell phones just weren't there. Not even smartphones, just cell phones weren't a common part of life, let alone smartphones. And now we're ordering everything online. We have it right in front of us. And it feels like the gamification with sports gambling. It feels like different games that you could play, a Candy Crush type game. That's what it looks like. That's how these apps are designed to keep you involved. And so I just think the fact that if this was 30 years ago, it wouldn't be as big of a social problem as it is now. It doesn't change the ethics of it. We could have those discussions. But the problem is it's everywhere, and you can take advantage of it.
Jared, you used a term that I want to ask you to speak deeper into, and that's the gamification of sports gambling. Help our listeners understand that.
So it's you're downloading an app when you are gambling on, let's just say, DraftKings. I'm not picking them out, just using one as an example. And you're downloading an app, and in front of you is all kinds of options that you have. And it's not just betting on winners and losers. And that's where a lot of people think betting is. Okay, I'm going to bet on this winner or this loser or maybe the point spread. You're betting on individual performances. You're betting on individual events that are occurring in a game. And you could be making, if you wanted to, hundreds and hundreds of bets within the same game if you're doing all the sort of iterations. So it's just not a one-time event anymore. And so, again, it feels like a game. And the fact that you're not physically handing over money, you're not walking up to a casino window and laying down $100 and saying, I want to bet, on this the Philadelphia Eagles to win this year. It's just money transferring on the phone. It's real money, but in a lot of ways it feels fake, and that's the trap with it.
That ephemeral quality, the fact that you're dealing with digital numbers and not physical cash, what does that do?
It changes the way we behave. I think there's enough evidence when people talk about personal finance, about, if you're having trouble with your budget, moving towards using cash more than using a credit card or a debit card, just because it changes the way that you treat the transaction. You almost feel pain more when you're giving up the dollar to buy a good or service. It's no different here. And when it's digital money, again, even though it's real, it just feels a lot faker. And so people are willing to give it away more.
And that has unfortunately shaped the way society is treating this as well.
Yes.
Share with us, in terms of the economic perspective of what this is doing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different angles that you can go. So the way that the legalization has been sold is on two fronts. One, it's been sold on, hey, this is human freedom, we should be allowed to do this. And there's philosophical objections to that. But from the economic side, this is a way that we can make revenue. This is activity, and by we I mean the government in this case. But this is an activity that's occurring, but it's underground. Why not legalize it, sanitize it, take tax revenue from it, and then different states will spend that in a variety of ways. And so it feels cleaner, and that's the way it's sold, rather than, wait, we're talking about, well, what could this do to the family? What can this do from an addiction perspective? What does it do to how one even approaches something that's a good activity, like a sport? How are you approaching something good in a different way here with gambling?
What are we seeing in terms of how this is affecting family relationships?
The interesting thing is this is still new enough that a lot of the research is not quite there. But some of what we've seen is we've seen stress pressures on family. One of the negatives with gambling in general, let alone sports gambling, is it tends to be amongst the young. It tends to be amongst those who are lower in the socioeconomic sphere. So sure, the big bets are placed by people who have the money, but the repeated bettors are those who are lower income, and the other one is with males. It's very male dominated. Well, the problem is if you get caught into this and it becomes a problem, it puts your finances in jeopardy. That also delays things like marriage prospects, and that's where the research isn't clear on yet. But that's a concern I certainly have.
Given that there's this new avenue of digital sports betting, how has that impacted the way the sports are being performed?
Yeah, before, if you wanted to fix a game, game fixing has been around for a long time. We don't have to go back that far to have seen this. But it really was, the mob was involved in some way, or somebody who was, in the black market was involved. And now it's a lot more of people pressuring, or athletes can directly benefit because there's so much money flowing through it in small ways. So before it really was winners, losers, point spreads. Now it's, hey, is this next pitch going to be a ball or a strike? Well, if a pitcher throws a ball or a strike, no one's going to know anything one way or the other. Now, if it becomes a pattern, which is what happened with the Cleveland Indians pitchers last year, right, then people caught on to it. But it's so easy to just sort of throw just a little bit of integrity away if it doesn't affect the overall game. And that's one of the problems going on. And it's tough to catch.
And the toughness to catch it is precisely one of the big issues. We've got about 30 seconds left in this segment.
Yeah.
To speak to listeners, especially who are parents, grandparents, who are concerned about their children and grandchildren in this issue.
I first of all, have the conversation. I look at it no differently than other aspects or uncomfortable conversations. Like if someone was to say, should I talk about pornography? I say, yes, you should talk about pornography. You should talk about drug use. You should talk about these things. Gambling is in that realm as well. Because if you're not talking about it and having an open conversation, what we do in the secret, right, from a Christian perspective, Satan loves when we do things in the secret. And usually we don't keep things secret because we're proud of them. So that's the first thing. Just go and have a conversation. And then from there, you can start working at what are the dangers of it? What maybe are ways that you can mitigate it if you're engaging in it, things like that.
I'm talking with Dr. Jared A. Pincin, Associate Professor of Economics at Cedarville University, and he's doing a lecture on the ethics and economics of sports gambling, which is exactly what we're talking about right now. We're going to take a little break, and when we continue, Jared will be here to exposit to us a little more about how this issue impacts us at the social level, the familial level, communal level. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Welcome back. I'm Marcus Pete. I'm joined by Dr. Jared A. Pincin. He is Associate Professor of Economics at Cedarville University. We're talking about the ethics and economics of sports gambling. Now, Jared, you were touching earlier about how there's a necessity here for us to have the conversation with our family about the reality that this is a problem.
So I think about it two ways, and this is part of my lecture here at Acton this week, which is we have to think about it from the two great commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And is this activity interfering with either one of those or both of those? And I would argue that oftentimes it is. You're typically engaging in gambling for the sake of the love of money, not for entertainment. That's what they'll tell you. Oh, just a little bit of entertainment. I'll take $100, do that, and let it go. We could have a discussion on whether that's a good or a bad thing, but it's often driven, at least for most gamblers, for more than that. I want this money. It becomes an idol. And then there's the love of neighbor. This is different than a sports competition where you're both putting your talents on the line, and you're putting it to the best of your ability. In order for you to win in gambling, somebody has to lose. And I would say to someone, is that really how you'd want to love your neighbor? When we talk about a transaction in economics, I trade you something that you value more than I value it, and you're trading me something that I value more than you value it. That's not what's happening with a wager.
Going back to what you mentioned about gamification, the thrill of having something that's of value to you invested in this, what does that do to the human person?
Yeah, we could easily make this commodification or very simply, and you're just trying to look at pleasing yourself, and no matter and trying to get that no matter how you get it. So again, with wagering, it's you're not taking from someone that didn't voluntarily enter that transaction, but you are taking from someone. There's not a value there that is being exchanged, and so it becomes a very self-centered activity, and that's where, again, what are we doing with our love of neighbor? And so, again, if you're talking to your family, you're talking to your children, particularly the older children who are involved in this. I mean, they're still your children if they're 40. Talking through about what it's doing to them. Is this a drive? Is this a focus? Are you hiding it from your spouse? Are you ashamed of the activity? Is it consuming your time? Are you sitting there on a Sunday morning at a sermon thinking, oh, I hope so-and-so runs for 100 yards so I can make that prop bet? Is that what's occupying your mind? If it's so, it's an idol, and we have to deal with that.
Going back to something you said earlier about just how ubiquitous the problem has become. For an alcoholic, there's no fear that someone is going to reach through your cell phone and give you a shot of whiskey.
That's right.
For a gambler, it's everywhere now. You can't even make a Venmo transaction without
Well,
it.
and in some ways it's even worse in that what sportsbooks are legally allowed to do is they're legally allowed to give free bets. And so they'll give those to losers, not to winners. So it's all about keeping you engaged. And that's how they promote, right? Open up a free account. Your first $200 is free, and you have to gamble that. You can't just make a bet, get $200 and take it out. But at the same time, they're able to legally prohibit winners from engaging. So if you win too much, they can stop you. If you lose too much, they're going to ask you to keep gambling by giving you free money to keep you hooked. And that would be like using the analogy with the alcoholic as if an alcohol company could just keep sending you free products for you to continue that. But if you drink too much, we'll leave you. Now the analogy breaks down there because they want you to drink more. Whereas if you win too much, sportsbooks don't want to have you in there. But that's the tricky part with all this.
And so what you're really seeing here is that all of this is gamed and set and fixed against the consumer no matter how you swing it.
There was a study from, I think it was UC Davis. If I got the school wrong, please forgive me there, listeners. But they looked at about 700,000 gamblers, and they found that close to 98% of them were losers. That if you just engage in it enough, you will lose, and that makes sense. Even professional handicappers we're looking at maybe 55% roughly that they're winning. This is what they do for a living. The odds are stacked against you. Just the way that sportsbooks are able to set odds. So just to give you an example, if it's a negative 110, so you have to wager $110 to win 100. Well, that means you need a winning percentage of a little over 52% just to break even over the long term. So yes, the odds are stacked against you. It's an illusion of control is what I tell people. People look at it like poker, where you can actually control at least a little bit of what's going on. You don't know the cards, but you can control what you have and a little bit of the math with it. You don't have that. It's an illusion of control. I can be a better informed gambler. I still cannot affect what happens on the playing field itself. And I think that's it's being sold as one thing when it's really another.
Is there a bit of a vicarious desire to be a part of the game proper, knowing that you actually can't?
I mean, sports is an entertaining activity. This is, we're not, I mean, you can, I suppose, but we're not gambling on, is this wall going to dry faster than another wall painting? We're because who cares? But there's an activity. The World Cup is going on right now, or when the Super Bowl happens, or March Madness in the United States. These are community events, and that lots of people are engaged in the activity. Even if you're not a sports fan, 150 million people are going to watch the Super Bowl. And so that's the other way it's sold by both sports leagues or sports books. Just become a little bit more involved. Just add a little bit more excitement to the game, and it's an accelerant on a behavior. So people like money, makes sense. People like sports, and now we're combining those two with the easy access of, I can do this on my phone, and nobody knows what I'm doing. It could look like I'm sending someone a text message when I'm placing a wager.
How does this impact, for example, like you mentioned, it becomes an idol. How does this impact interpersonal relationships?
It's the secretive nature with this. Again, this is where I would compare it to pornography. Most people are not saying, hey, this is something that I engage in. I'm very proud of this activity. Gambling is often that way. And a lot of times it's because of how often you lose rather than you win. If you win a bet, people go, yes, I won this, I did this, I'm smart, look at what I've done. But the odds are that you will lose over the long run, and then you start to hide it. And when you hide things, it breaks down the communication. And that's deadly, not deadly, but that's consequential when it comes to, say, your family relations with your spouse. You cannot be hiding things from your spouse unless it's, this is the gift I'm giving you for your birthday, right? Things like that. And as soon as you lose that trust, then it leads to other parts of the relationship. Well, if you're not truthful in this area, are you truthful in other areas? Oh, wait, where did that $100 go that we were put in this budget for this purpose, and it's no longer there? And the secretive nature is the problem.
From an ethical perspective, especially, given that addiction is rightly we can think of it as a disease. Mm-hmm. We've created a social avenue where this particular version of an addiction is not only easily fed, there's an incentive to it being fed. What does that say about our society?
Well, and it's socially acceptable, at least a lot more socially acceptable than it would have been in the past. And I know there's ups and downs to this throughout history, but it shows that we are sinful, fallen people, and we have to take that very seriously. And if I'm talking to a church audience on this, you start there. Look, we are sinful, we are fallen. The only way that we are redeemed is through the blood of Jesus Christ. But even through that, we're still not perfected, in the sense that we're not perfected until he returns or he takes us home. And so we always need to be asking ourselves, how is this affecting, again, how I love God, how I love my neighbor? And if it's impacting those two, then even if you don't think gambling itself is a sin, you walk away going, it's a sin for me. And I need to be lifting up my brothers and sisters rather than taking from them.
Which goes to the greater question then of, okay, you think about some of the framers of this nation and how they thought about virtue as a foundational construct for this republic to flourish. We've created a social avenue for the flourishing of what is ostensibly a vice and therefore a sin.
Yeah, no, we have. I don't know if this is new. I go back and forth in my mind, and when I talk to my wife, who's much brighter than I am on virtues and vices, and I go, I don't know if any of this is new. Mm-hmm. This is human nature. We're fallen beings. but we've certainly had times where we have lifted up the virtues more. And I don't think we're in one of those times now.
Yeah.
And it really is a pursuit of consumerism and ease. And even the lie of if something is consensual between adults, then it's okay. And I think that strips away what makes us human, the reasoning capability of saying, I can do this, but I'm choosing not to because it's not good for me and it's not good for others.
Right. That ultimately consent is a smaller consideration compared to the objectivity of the act.
Yes. I mean, consent is, of course, important, but it is not where we stop the conversation.
Yeah. Well, how can people follow your work, Jared, and people who are concerned about this issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do interviews on, if you're in Ohio, you'll probably hear my voice or see me. But there's not a lot being written on this issue. I do think Acton is starting to pick up on this, and there are places that are trying to talk more about it. So I don't have a good answer for that question, to be honest. But what I would say to people is stay involved. If you're in a state in the United States, particularly where it is not legalized, get involved in the conversation. Be involved. There's only 11 states at this point that haven't legalized it. If you're in a state that has legalized it, be involved with what are ways that we can minimize this harm. In the state of Ohio, they're now talking about maybe taking it from allowing online gambling to making it just in person. I have doubts that will occur, but that was a discussion that should have happened 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Not now. So it's one of those issues that we can't be silent on.
I've been talking with Dr. Jared Pincin, Associate Professor of Economics at Cedarville University, about the ethics and economics of sports gambling. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.